Part of the coronavirus relief package passed by Congress includes providing loan and payroll protection grants to airlines. But those loans come with certain conditions, like prohibiting stock buybacks and share dividends for at least a year after they have repaid any assistance. Also, the airlines are prohibited from laying off or furloughing employees until September 30th. Hundreds of thousands of jobs saved by this. Quote, labor unions quickly changed the narrative on this, pushing the industry toward a pledge to not furlough workers in exchange for their grants. Their efforts were instrumental in getting approval for the airline aid. Joining me now is the president of the union that proposed the aviation's plans, industry's plans for workers, the Association of Flight Attendants, Sara Nelson, also staff writer for The New Yorker, Sheila Kolhatkar. She's the author of the New York Times bestseller Black Edge, Inside Information, Dirty Money, and the Quest to Bring Down the Most Wanted Man on Wall Street. Sara, you and I have been talking about the efforts to make sure that the money that goes to companies, in this particular instance to airlines, goes toward payroll. Now, to most people, that should be obvious because payroll is, generally speaking, the biggest nut for airlines. But in fact, there are other places like Denmark that are keeping people home and paying them their salaries, making sure that federal assistance is going to people more than just companies.
That's right. And so the way that we structured this was in two different tranches. So the payroll grants are to go only to pay salaries, benefits for workers. It is very clear. And then the second is loans that the airlines will have to pay back and the government can take an equity stake for. But the payroll grants were never, ever expected to be leveraged because this is, instead of having people in the unemployment lines, we're keeping them in their jobs, connected to their health care, and able to work once we get through this crisis. We can lift off the industry again, which really serves as the backbone of our economy.
And of course, in Denmark, you don't have to worry about your health care being connected to your employer because you get universal health care. Anyway, something we might think about. Sheila Kolhatkar, the Treasury Secretary, has just said that if you are set up to get your checks into your account, you'll have them within 3 weeks. If you're not and you're going to get a paper check, it might take a little bit longer. That is much faster than they were able to do it during the financial crisis. But the bottom line is there are still some Americans who have not filed for 2018 or 2019. They're going to have to do so in order for the government to have a place to deposit their checks. Do you think we're going to see in that 3 weeks, once we start getting this money back and maybe we start to see this infection spread to other parts of the country, what do you think the economy is going to start to look like in 3 weeks or a month?
Well, we're somewhat in unfamiliar, uncharted territory here because we've never really experienced a situation where we had the government issue a decree to simply paralyze almost every single business in the country at the same time. I think this is a moment when the Denmark model is really valuable because they are taking this very holistic approach. They are saying we are going to put every single cost of this pandemic onto the government's credit card, and we are going to simply put the economy into sort of a frozen state so that when this crisis finally passes, we will not be facing an absolutely decimated economy and all the societal ills that will flow from that. They can sort of thaw everything out. People can return to their businesses. Hopefully they will not be completely destroyed. Things will be somewhat as they left them. And this is really a moment when the Treasury Secretary and others should be kind of looking at that more drastic model that is really called for in this situation.
Sara, at United, which is an airline you represent, and Delta, which is one that your union doesn't represent, in both cases they've asked people to take either unpaid leave or sort of take packages to leave. This bill means that they've got to keep everybody else paid until September 30th. What's your sense of what happens after that? Is it another tranche of the bill that we're going to have to extend that, or do you think that by September 30th we'll be back to some sort of business and we'll have to deal with it after that?
Well, listen, we have to make sure that the healthcare providers have all that they need, and we are focusing on fighting the virus. But we also need to make sure that Secretary Mnuchin follows through with the bipartisan agreement, because the airline package was the last thing on the table for this $2 trillion deal. And what happened late at night, Tuesday night, was Senator Toomey came in and wanted to put a financial instrument onto the payroll grants that are intended for the workers only, not for the airlines, but for the workers specifically, and wanted to put a financial instrument on here that would make it impossible for the airlines to take, that would essentially render it unusable. So we fought that. We fought that very hard. And what we did was we were able to make at the last minute, this is an option for Secretary Mnuchin, but the Secretary needs to understand this week that this was an agreement, a bipartisan agreement that Senator Toomey tried to destroy. Senator Toomey from the state where the first flight attendant died from coronavirus. And so we're going to be fighting very hard for the Secretary to follow through on this, because otherwise that is what United Airlines is talking about. If this is not structured correctly, after September, there could be a lot of hurt. And we don't want to see that happen. That's not what was intended, and that's not what Denmark is doing.
Sheila, it is kind of incredible, though, that, you know, we don't normally have unions and representatives of working people at the table in America as effectively as Sara and her group have been. In Germany, they do actually do that. In parts of Europe, unions are at major negotiating tables. We haven't had that, so this might be a model for us to follow for the future, including the restriction on using government money for buybacks.
This is really a moment when we should be thinking about what the role of American business is. And this prior old model that said that companies should direct every dollar of profit to stockholders and corporate salaries is over. And we should be looking ahead to the multi-stakeholder model where workers and employees and customers have a role in business decisions as well.
Thank you to both of you. Sara, congratulations on the work that your union has done, and hopefully we'll be talking about this in 10 or 15 years as a model of how we can start to figure out when we get bailouts and things like that and loans and grants that the workers benefit from it. Sara is the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA. Sheila Kolhatkar, my friend, is a staff writer at The New Yorker and the author of the book Black Edge.